For centuries, the principal power of Southeast Asia was the Khmer Empire. The Khmer Empire has left us a legacy of incredible and unique construction projects that serve as Cambodia's most famous tourist attractions, with the most prominent of all being the religious complex at Angkor Wat, regarded as the largest religious complex in all of the world. As with many of the societies of medieval Southeast Asia, religion and construction were two of the most important features. The Khmer Empire extended its influence over lands of many of the modern countries of mainland Southeast Asia. How did the Khmer Empire rise? And how did the Khmer Empire fall? And what were its greatest gifts to the world? The History of the World podcast, written and presented by Chris Hasler.
I wrote a little song to remind you, Choice Hotels get you more of the experiences you value. The Cambria Hotel's got it all. A rooftop bar, have a ball. Bring a date, your squad, or even your mom. Book direct at choicehotels.com.
Study and play come together on a Windows 11 PC. And for a limited time, college students get the best of both worlds. Get the Unreal College Deal. Everything you need to study and play with select Windows 11 PCs. Eligible students get a year of Microsoft 365 Premium and a year of Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with a custom color Xbox wireless controller. Learn more at windows.com/student offer. While supplies last. Ends June 30th. Terms at aka.ms/collegepc.
Volume 4. The Medieval World. Episode 80. The Khmer Empire. The Khmer Empire was centred on the lands of the modern country of Cambodia, but at its peak it would cover an area that was a large portion of Southeast Asia. The southernmost tip of Southeast Asia is at the southern end of the Malay Peninsula, but if we ignore the Malay Peninsula, there is a cape at the base of the bulbous part of the eastern half of the Southeast Asia Peninsula, and the cape is called Cape Ka Mau. These days, the cape is at the southernmost point of the country of Vietnam, but traditionally it was Cambodian, and Cambodian cultures and their predecessors were established based on this cape. The reason for this is due to the emerging maritime trade routes that were being established, which connected China in the east to India in the west, and as a consequence, the Southwest Asian, African and European cultures beyond India. As a natural stop-off point on the maritime route, the local population would be exposed to the wealth and cultures of India and China, both of which would influence them. The first known polity that existed in this area of Southeast Asia was called Funan by the Chinese. Due to a lack of contemporary writing from within this region, historians have to make guesses about the polity of Funan, including the ethnicity of the people and the exact political makeup of the polity. Peoples of Austronesian, Mon and Khmer ethnicities are known to have been associated with this area at one time or another, and it is not completely clear whether Funan was a unified state or a collection of independent states. In reality, it may have been all of these things or none of these things at any particular point during its existence, which is likely to have spanned a number of centuries. As with many of the Southeast Asian cultures which emerged in international consciousness during the first millennium, there was a great Indian influence on the culture and religion of these people. Hinduism and Buddhism existed in this area, and that could only be possible with the eastward migrations and visits of the people from the Indian subcontinent. For regular followers of the podcast, we have seen this ethnic influence on areas of the modern countries of Myanmar, Indonesia and Vietnam, so we should not be surprised in any way by this. Our earliest records of Funan came from 3rd century Chinese envoys who told of a ruler called Fan Chan who ruled over a polity based on the lands of the Mekong River and its tributaries and its delta. The lands around the Mekong River flooded quite healthily to support the rice-growing communities. Apparently, the monarch's ruling status in Funan was rather fragile, with assassinations of the existing monarch being all too common. Fan Chang came to the throne as a consequence of regicide, and he himself would later be assassinated. However, during his tenure as the ruler of Funan, Fan Chang sent gifts to the Chinese court, demonstrating Funan's knowledge and understanding of the power of China at the same time. Interestingly, it seems that the elite members of society held a position of Brahmin status, which related to the earliest Hindu concepts of a caste system, with the Brahmin status being the highest status of the 4 Brahmanist Varnas, which is one of the earliest concepts of Hinduism. Although there is no evidence that the Funan fully adapted the Hindu caste system, it is clear the Hindu influence was a major factor of Funan. We cannot be completely sure exactly when Indian cultures came and Indianised the population, but it was certainly before the mid-3rd century. Early merchant ships tended to hug the coastline for safety reasons, which is why geographically places like the prominent landmass of southern Vietnam, Cape Ca Mau and the Mekong River Delta was an attractive stop-off point for merchants. But as time went on, shipbuilding improved and the necessity to hug the coastlines was not as required, as merchant ships were more robust and quicker for the open seas, and this would have a negative impact on Funan, who previously could rely on the visits of merchants, but now were often getting bypassed. Traders would not sail all the way to the Strait of Malacca at the far southern end of the Malay Peninsula until this period, as they would prefer the safety of crossing the Malay Peninsula much further north at the narrow Isthmus of Gra. Chinese writings refer to a polity which was a vassal state to Funan, and its name was Chenla. We don't really know a great deal about Chenla as a functioning polity, and as with Funan, we don't see Chenla stated in contemporary local writings, with the name Chenla just being used as a Chinese exonym. Some historians suggest the lack of importance of Funan as a stopover point of the east-west maritime trade route led to its weakening as a state, and this may have opened the door for Chenla, an inland polity, to rise up and challenge Funan and eventually make Funan a vassal state of Chenla. So little is known about this transition that it is hardly worth us wasting too much time in speculating the actual ins and outs. Some historians doubt that Chenla was an actual polity at all, and possibly was just a different dynasty of rulers. Something that further confuses the matter is that the Chinese referred to two Chenla. One they would refer to as the land, Chenla, and the other they would refer to as the water, Chenla. The water, Chenla, was named as such due to their close proximity to the coast. It is suggested that the land Chenla was the ones that challenged Funan. Historians note how the architecture of all of the societies of Cambodia and the surrounding lands was quite advanced during this period. The archaeological site of Ok Eo is suggested to be one of the earliest coastal cities of Southeast Asia, based in the far south of the modern country of Vietnam. Artifacts recovered from the site demonstrate a diverse collection of goods, including Chinese, Indian, and even Roman. The capabilities and community at Ok Eo was quite advanced. There must have been a large settled population, as demonstrated by architecture and a constructed canal. Ok Eo in Funan was a major international port. So much is not known about the cultures of Southeast Asia, but this area of the world played such an important role in global trade and cultural development. Although both Hinduism and Buddhism existed in this area of Southeast Asia, evidently Hinduism was very popular, with archaeological finds including Hindu temples and statues.
Yawaman II.
It appears that towards the end of the 8th century, the man who would ultimately become the ruler, Yawaman II, was in exile in Java. As this information was gathered from texts, we probably have to assume that Java refers to the Indonesian island of Java in maritime Southeast Asia. What we do believe about the island of Java is that a large portion had come under the control of a polity that had emerged on the adjacent island of Sumatra. The polity is often referred to as Srivijaya, and it had suddenly become quite powerful as a large amount of maritime traffic was now sailing around these Indonesian islands, and the prosperity of the local area was blossoming, just as it had done in Funan some centuries earlier. Srivijaya may have been looking to extend its influence to include the lands now under the control of Chenla, and Yawaman could be considered to be a useful pawn in this game, as he could be sent to seize control of Chenla and rule as a vassal to Srivijaya. Yawaman was believed to have been of Khmer descent, so he could be forwarded as a legitimate ruler of Chenla, probably with blood links to the existing rulers, although we have no real idea about this. Yawaman travelled to Chenla, quite likely the land of his origin, and undertook a successful campaign of unification of the various Chenla tribes, bringing them under one rule and operating under the support of the Javanese polity, likely Srivijaya. However, Yawaman had no long-term interest in remaining loyal to Java. He had his own ambitions and would claim his conquests for himself, naming the new kingdom Kambuja Desa. He declared himself as the Devaraja, which is a king ruling as a manifestation of a deity, and this would be to legitimise himself as the approved ruler of this new united kingdom. After his successful rise to power, Yawaman would travel his kingdom, establishing cities that served as important centres for their respective local areas, controlling the waterways as means to govern the population. Historians see the ascension of Yawaman to the throne as the beginning of the Khmer Empire. Some historians also suggest that the Khmer Empire was a mandala, and we have stumbled across this word before in our episode on Srivijaya. A mandala is essentially an area controlled by various tribal chieftains who all recognised a central authority, which in this case was Chayawarman. Although Chayawarman was the first recognised ruler of the Khmer Empire, historians refer to him as Chayawarman II to distinguish him from the 7th century Chenla ruler with the same name. Also, some historians will cite that certain Hindu temple constructions were commissioned by Chayawarman, but the reality is that it is difficult to actually pinpoint particular temples to particular monarchs due to a lack of clarity. You will notice that each ruler of the Khmer Empire has the suffix Warman as part of their name. The word Warman originates from a Sanskrit word meaning protector, and the Khmer rulers were seen as protectors of their people. It's a bit sketchy exactly when the centre of power moved to the region of Angkor, which is adjacent to the modern Cambodian city of Siem Reap. There is no doubt that there was a migration during the 9th and 10th centuries as temple construction started to become more commonplace in the area of Angkor, and ultimately the ceremony of declaration as Devaraja, which took place at the accession of each monarch, would move to Angkor. Construction was important for these early monarchs of the Khmer Empire.
Yasowarman.
Chayawarman II was succeeded by his son, who ruled as Chayawarman III. The husband of one of Chayawarman III's daughters then succeeded him as Indrawarman I, and Indrawarman's son then ruled as Yasowarman I. Yasowarman ruled at the turn of the 10th century. Yasowarman is credited with the relocation of the capital city to Angkor, but he is also noted for his ambitious construction projects. He is known for his temple construction and for his urban planning, but he is also noted for the completion of a large reservoir called Indratataka, initially commissioned by his father, Indravarman. During the monsoon season, this reservoir is said to have been able to contain 7.5 million cubic metres of water and was essential for the irrigation of the paddy fields where rice was grown to feed the expanding population. Nothing remains of the reservoir today as it is now dry, but there was a temple constructed on an island in the middle of the reservoir which can be visited to this day. The temple is a Hindu temple dedicated to the Hindu god Shiva, and the temple is called Lolei, and it is one of 3 significant temples constructed in this area during this period. The Khmer specialised in reservoir building, and this is an example of that specialisation. The reservoirs are referred to locally by the word Barai. Yasowarman's reign is significant because it is believed that it is when the centre of power moved to Angkor, which was a city called Yashodharapura. Yasowarman had built a temple a few miles northwest of the Indratataka, and the temple was called Phnom Bakeng. Phnom Bakeng was built on top of a hill, which, if you make the effort to climb, rewards you with some breathtaking views of the landscape around it, where it is possible to see some of the nearby ancient constructions such as the temples and barais. Yasowarman built a road linking the constructions at Indratataka to the temple at Phnom Bakeng. The city of Yashodharapura was established as the new capital of the Khmer Empire at the Phnom Bakeng end of Yasowarman's road. An even larger barai was built at Yashodharapura, and the barai was called Yashodharatataka. The Yashodharatataka is also now dried out and is often referred to as the East Barai. Indra had a grandson who came to be known as Jayawarman IV. Jayawarman appears to have made attempts to relocate the capital a lot further north at a place called Chokgagyar, which is now called Kokkai, and this is seen as a very controversial time in Khmer history. It seems that Jayawarman had opinions of his own self-importance, not only claiming the Devaraja, but also claiming that the Hindu god Shiva existed inside him. In the Khmer tradition, hilltop temples and other temples with a barae to help feed the population were built. It has been suggested that Jayawarman also usurped the throne from what should have been the legitimate bloodline, but we have to be careful not just to blindly assume that the throne was intended to pass from father to son, as we see so often in other areas of the world. Some historians believe that he was a legitimate monarch. It is not completely clear whether there was a conflict during this period, and many sources suggest that there was. After the death of Jayawarman IV, a family relation who would become Rajendrawarman II is suggested to have taken power away from Jayawarman's son Harshawarman II, and this is how the throne returned to Yashodharapura, which we also know as Angkor. So there is a strong suggestion of civil conflict during the 10th century.
Suryawarman.
The kings of the Khmer Empire were not all of the same bloodlines, so anyone descended from an important aristocratic family could try to claim the throne. When the 10-year-old Jayawarman V came to the throne in the year 968, members of the aristocratic elite would seek to control affairs. The death of Jayawarman in 1001 brought about civil dispute. His successor, Udayadityawarman, died within months of his accession, and this brought Jayawarman to the throne, although there is a huge question mark over his legitimacy. It is suggested that Jayawarman was the brother of the deceased king, Udayadityawarman, but there is also a suggestion that he was a usurper. Whatever the case, a civil war broke out as a man who would come to be known as Suryawarman challenged for the throne, and so 9 years of conflict broke out. Suryawarman came out victorious and became the new king despite not seemingly having a strong legitimate claim through his own ancestry. The rise of Suryawarman at the beginning of the 11th century sparked a period of prosperity for the empire, however. Suryawarman was determined to bring a stability of rulership to the Khmer Empire. After some years of civil instability, the Khmer Empire would enter the 11th century with a brighter future under Suryawarman. Suryawarman's approach was one of inclusiveness. Despite there traditionally being considerable regard for the Hindu gods, especially Shiva and Vishnu, Suryawarman would make notable sacrifices for the Buddhist monasteries and temples also, and this would cement their support for him. As we have mentioned in the past, we can be too quick to judge religion based on modern perceptions, but religious tolerance was something quite commonplace in the historical world, and the cultures of the Far East were no exception. Suryawarman was apparently a highly skilled diplomat, securing the support of local leaders and religious houses alike. Suryawarman continued the tradition of construction, and his most notable work was the West Barae, the largest water reservoir of the Khmer. Suryawarman did not just stop with domestic organisation, but would work hard to expand his influence in Southeast Asia, and would also establish strong diplomatic ties with the powerful Chola Empire of the Indian subcontinent. The foundations laid by Suryavarman would hold the Khmer Empire in good stead for the remainder of the 11th century. His successors would consolidate his gains and continue the harmonious coexistence of Hinduism with Mahayana Buddhism, and the capital at Angkor would continue to grow.
Angkor Wat.
The most notable construction of the Khmer Empire was that of Angkor Wat. Angkor Wat is a religious complex constructed at Angkor and quite close to the West Baray. So significant is Angkor Wat in Cambodian culture that it is a part of the Cambodian national flag. The complex is around 3 times the size of the Vatican City, which makes it the largest religious complex in the entire world. The king who constructed this incredible site was Suryavarman II, and he dedicated his site to the Hindu god Vishnu. It is said that it took Suryavarman II around 300,000 workers, utilising 6,000 elephants to complete this work, and it took almost 40 years. There are over 1,000 buildings at the complex. During the 12th century, it is estimated that 750,000 people lived in Angkor. So the 12th century represented a positive continuation of the good foundations laid by the Khmer Empire in the 11th century, and by now it was a very powerful state. To the east of Khmer territory was a narrow coastal strip of land under the control of the Cham people, which we referred to as Champa, and Champa was subject to Khmer aggressions in the middle of the 12th century. At one point the Khmer sacked the Cham capital of Vijaya, but the Cham were able to run the Khmer out of Champa soon afterwards. The Khmer subjugated the lands to their north, which are the lands of and around the modern country of Laos. And this would also lead to sustained battles with the Vietnamese territory to their northeast, the state of Dai Viet. It may come as no big surprise to learn that the Khmer Empire was also sending tribute to China, obviously to remain in their favour. Being on the right side of China could have a positive effect on a nation, as China prized having influence in Southeast Asia due to its desire to nurture its trade routes westwards. The success of Suryavarman II would provide a platform for further prosperity in the later years of the 12th century. The throne would eventually pass to Chayavarman VII, who was a devout Buddhist, which, although not discouraged, was less common with Khmer monarchs who tended to be devoutly Hindu. One impact of this was on the vast religious complex of Angkor Wat that was originally Vaishnavite on its construction, that is, devoted to the Hindu god Vishnu. Now the new king, Chayawarman VII, would turn Angkor Wat into a Buddhist complex. Chayawarman VII's rule is seen as the peak of Khmer cultural and territorial expansion. Before Chayawarman came to the throne, the Khmer had suffered a bit of a shock when the Cham from the west, who had previously been victims of the aggression of the Khmer, actually launched an attack on the Khmer via the river systems and sacked their capital at Angkor in the year 1177. Chayawarman was involved in the military response, and after successfully expelling the invaders, he would declare himself as the new king in 1181. As King Chayawarman VII, he would attack and conquer Champa, and the presence of Khmer military remained in Champa right up until 1220, after the death of Chayawarman VII. One of the marvellous creations of Chayawarman VII that can still be seen to this day is the Bayon Temple, which sits in the centre of the city of Angkor Thom. The city is yet another creation of Chayawarman. The Bayon Temple has numerous towers, each of which have faces carved into the sides. The temple's towers are constructed in the unmistakable style of the Khmer. The Bayon Temple stands at the centre of Angkor Thom, a city which contains numerous ceremonial buildings and served for both administrative and religious purposes. Angkor Thom could have sustained up to 150,000 residents. As with most of the other sites mentioned in this podcast episode, you can visit Angkor Thom today as a tourist. Chayawarman VII was a very strong ruler who promoted Mahayana Buddhism as his primary religion and constructed the necessary infrastructure within his empire to be able to sustain military forces. Chayawarman was able to secure many of his borders through a wily approach of aggression and diplomacy. It was under Chayawarman VII that the Khmer Empire was at its peak.
Decline.
After the death of Chayawarman VII in 1218, it appears that the Khmer throne passed to his son, Indrawarman II, who continued the Buddhist rule of the empire. Politically, it seems that things started turning against the Khmer. As mentioned before, the Khmer withdrew from Champa within a couple of years of Chayawarman's death, but more significant was what was happening to the Khmer's west rather than their east. A group of Thai people had migrated southwards from southern China to the lands in the north of the modern country of Thailand, and these people were Buddhists, but they were Theravada Buddhists, which differed from the Mahayana Buddhism which Chayawarman VII had worked so hard to promote. These Thai people established a centre of power at the city of Sukhothai in northern Thailand, and these lands were subject to the Khmer Empire during this period. After the death of Indrawarman II in 1240, his son would rule as Chayawarman VIII, and this Chayawarman would attempt to turn the religion of the Khmer Empire back to Hinduism, as it had been the previous century when the king Suryawarman II had built Angkor Wat. As a subject city to the Khmer Empire, Sukhothai was taxed, and the ruling class of the city were not interested in putting up with that, just so that the Khmer rulers could build their lavish buildings and boost their military capabilities. So a division started between Sukhothai and their Khmer overlords. This is what instigated Sukhothai to become an independent policy, ruling over themselves with their own king. We can recognise Sukhothai as the ancestor of the modern state of Thailand and the home of the Thai people, spelled Thai, not to be confused with those Thai people that we have mentioned already, spelled Tai. The modern Thai people of Thailand are a branch of the historic Thai people from the lands of southern China. The rise in power of Sukhothai was a genuine threat to the westernmost lands of the Khmer Empire. Historians debate the reasons for the decline in power of the Khmer Empire. It definitely seems that Sukhothai was able to police the western borders of the Khmer Empire well, which prevented any Khmer westward ambitions. It is suggested that our old friend climate change would have a profound effect on the Khmer Empire, and this would make a lot of sense when we consider the Khmer dependency on water. When we think back to the vast barays constructed by great kings gone by, we can think of how much the Khmer cities and their bulging populations relied on the waters of the Barais, and if there was a drought that caused a decline in the water levels which fed the Barais, and the natural water supplies of the Mekong River and the Tonle Sap Lake, among others, then it shouldn't be a surprise to assume that the Khmer Empire population suffered as a consequence. It is thought, but not known, that this was a major factor in the weakening of the Khmer and why their neighbours were able to get the better of them too often. Sukhothai was not able to keep control of Thai lands throughout the 14th century, and a new power developed from the city of Ayutthaya, which would take control of the lands of modern Thailand away from Sukhothai. Meanwhile, in the north, another group of Thai people from southern China established a polity based on the lands in and around the modern country of Laos, and the polity was called Lan Shang, and it would push the Khmer Empire southwards back into their heartlands in the modern country of Cambodia and the far south of Vietnam. By the second half of the 14th century, the lands under the influence of the Khmer had probably halved in size. It appears that Ayutthaya attacked the Khmer Empire on numerous occasions, with some dates being put forward by sources being debated by historians, but most will agree that in 1431 a decisive campaign took place where an Ayutthaya army sacked the city of Angkor and drove the Khmer out. The Khmer decided to re-establish their capital city in the south nearer the coast, and the city of Angkor was reduced to being a ceremonial centre. The influence of Theravada Buddhism from the Siamese societies in the west, in this case Ayutthaya, spread throughout the lands of the Khmer Empire, and this is really seen as the fall of the imperial regime of the Khmer. A polity still existed in the aftermath, but it had lost all of its political and religious esteem and simply became a sea-facing Cambodian kingdom. The new capital city was established at Chaktomuk, which is the modern Cambodian capital city of Phnom Penh, and the city of Angkor, the great capital of the Khmer Empire, during the period known as the Angkor period of Cambodian history, was left to become a remote mystery deep in the Cambodian jungle.
When you need to build up your team to handle the growing chaos at work, use Indeed Sponsored Jobs. It gives your job post the boost it needs to be seen and helps reach people with the right skills, certifications, and more. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. That's Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need a hiring hero? This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs.
You have one new message. Translating. Disney and Pixar's Hoppers is now available on Disney+.
You could say that again.
Critics are calling it Pixar's funniest movie ever and a wildly entertaining ride. Blizzard Potato. It's certified fresh and verified hot.
Now we party.
This is incredible!
Wow, I am clearing the rest of the day.
Disney and Pixar's Hoppers, now available on Disney+. Rated PG.
Thank you very much for listening to this week's episode of the History of the World podcast about the Khmer Empire. If you enjoy this podcast and you'd like to support the podcast, please visit our website, historyoftheworldpodcast.com. Click on the Patreon link and sign up to make a monthly contribution. You can do it for as little as $1 a month or whatever you like. It really helps out. It really does. You will become a lifelong member of the History of the World podcast Illuminati, and you'll qualify for some gifts and rewards. And this week, we welcome into the History of the World podcast Illuminati Piper Jarvis and Trevor John. Thank you so much and welcome in. If you want to get in touch with the podcast, drop me a line at historyoftheworldpodcast@mail.com. You can also follow the podcast on Facebook, X, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Tumblr, Threads and Mastodon. And if you can't get enough of the podcast, then please look out for the special debrief episode coming out in the next day or two, where I'll be discussing some more of the aspects of this episode that you just listened to. And there'll be a few extra little bits and pieces.
Listener messages and reviews.
Got a lovely review from R. Remon from the Netherlands. Thank you very much for your review from the Netherlands. Great to hear from the countries that are not the obvious four that podcasters tend to get listeners from, which is the USA, Great Britain, Australia and Canada. So it's great to get a review from the Netherlands. It says, Chris Hasler is doing an amazing job. Dear Chris, only recently I stumbled upon your great podcast, well narrated and an absolute pleasure to listen to. The work and time that you have put into this endeavour is mind-boggling. A true Herculean feat. Very, very kind indeed. Very kind. And we got a message from Ian Katz, who put, hi again, Chris. A question. How did the ancient Romans calculate the years? We know that Julius Caesar was murdered in 44 BCE, but what was the Roman equivalent? Thanks for the podcast. Keep up the good work. From what we can gather, years were often referenced by events in the ancient world. So in some societies, you might have the year when the year when the volcano erupted, or the year when the king crossed the desert, or the year when the river flooded. So it would be they wouldn't have a numerical reference. They would more likely have a reference to an event. But I believe, if I'm not mistaken, during the years of the Roman Empire, they used to often reference the actual emperor himself. So, for example, if it was the Emperor Tiberius, it'd be the first year of Tiberius, the second year of Tiberius, the third year of Tiberius. So there wouldn't be like we have nowadays, where we're just counting endlessly 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 up until the most infinite number we can think of. But of course, before the times of the Roman emperors, probably the most significant annual event in the Roman Republic was when they elected the consuls. So every year, the most significant event was the election of the two consuls, who were sort of the two primary, or the two primary politicians of the Roman Republic. And so that year would be remembered as the year that whoever were the consuls, the main consuls. And that would be how the years were remembered, how they were referred to. Of course, as historians, we're interested in historical years, but I don't really believe that the Roman Republic, when they look back on their history, was necessarily that important to reference something that happened 100 years ago. It was more important that it happened sometime in the past. So numerically named years were not really a significant thing until a number of centuries after the Roman Republic was supplanted by the Roman Empire. So this notion of numerical naming of years certainly didn't come until the early medieval age. And so that's pretty much it. That's what my recollection of the answer to your question would be. Anyway, that's it for this week. Thank you so much. Do look out for the debrief episode coming in the next day or two, where I'll be discussing the episode that you just listened to. quite interesting, but quite tricky as well. A lot of difficult names, wasn't there? And like king names and that kind of thing, and limited information, which meant that we had to sort of be honest about that. But certainly the Khmer Empire, a very commanding entity within that medieval period of Southeast Asia, so very much worth covering. Next time we'll be looking at Champa before we move on from Southeast Asia, and we look at the Austronesian peoples who migrated away from the Sinosphere and China and Southeast Asia, and we start looking at the Pacific Ocean, which leads us also on to New Zealand. So some really interesting, and Easter Island, of course. So we'll be heading in that direction in the coming episodes. But thanks for listening, and until next time, be good.
The History of the World podcast, written and presented by Chris Hasler. Please consider making a financial contribution by going to the historyoftheworldpodcast.com website and clicking on the Patreon link. Email the show at historyoftheworldpodcast@mail.com. And don't forget to join our social media at Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and Tumblr. See you next time.